So I want to introduce Zaheera from Databricks. Been working in data for quite a long period of time, but you've certainly risen to the VP of Engineering. So yeah, without any further ado and me butchering it any further, Zaheera.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. I'm Zaheera. I'm an engineering leader here at Databricks. I've been at Databricks for 4 years. I've actually been in the data and analytics space for 20 plus years. Yes, a long time. And I've worked on both sides of it. I've worked on building tools that people can use to ask questions and understand their data. And I've also been on the other side of it, encouraging people to actually use data to make data-driven decisions. Before Databricks, I was at Tableau for 6 years. I worked on the Tableau data management product line, which is Tableau Prep and Tableau Catalog. And I actually started out my career as an engineer on the Excel team. So in today's session, what I was going to talk about is these 20 years of experience, kind of distilling it down into at least 3 areas that I've seen really help companies with democratizing data, and especially the last 4 years of my experience at Databricks. So what I'll start with is, what are some of the challenges that people have in their data estates and their data platforms, and what stops data from being broadly usable? And then I'll talk about how governance and sharing can really help, and how to enable more people to ask and answer questions directly. A little bit of background on Databricks. It's founded by 7 researchers from Berkeley. They're the inventors of the Lakehouse paradigm. Our founders have created many of the very popular open source projects in data and AI. And these projects form the foundation of our open approach. We have a global R&D organization. I'm actually local. I'm based here in Bellevue. So it was great to be able to come here today and be part of this. And we actually also just opened up our newest engineering site in Vancouver. So I also wanted to share a little bit about the scale of data that we're processing. And the reason for that is that this scale is where I've really seen how these approaches that I'm going to share about today, consistently accelerate data democratization. So just to give you a sense, we're processing exabytes of data on 50 million VMs per day. Okay, so let's start with the challenges, right? Every company aims to be a data and AI company. This is not controversial, it's very well accepted. And it's not just about data, of course, it's also about AI. But in order to be able to be successful, you need a really good data strategy, right? So this is the ideal vision, right? Clean, organized. I see some smiles in the audience. This is the actual reality, right? It's a mess, fragmented. So there's 3 main challenges that we see. Fragmentation. Companies often have multiple warehouses. Either it's because of acquisitions as the company has grown, or different departments making decisions that are kind of local to help their needs. The other challenge that we see is around access. Many more users and many more types of users need access to the data. So whether it's data scientists or analysts, and now even AI agents, how do you make sure that they have governed access to the data? And then there's more types, of course, of use cases, right? There's BI use cases, compliance use cases, and now, of course, Gen AI use cases. So let me give you a couple of examples of the challenges. I'm sure some of this will resonate with people in the room. So Sega, video gaming company, they ingest 50,000 events per second from 40 million players. And their challenge was around integration and data quality. Another organization, Italgas, they're a 180-year-old gas distributor. And their challenge was around siloed data systems. So to give you a sense, in 2023, before they started their data transformation journey, they had over 90,000 unresolved customer complaints. A 180-year-old company, you can imagine like the different data silos, over the years. So different industries, same pattern, right? Bottleneck is access to usable, trusted, and governed data. So to truly democratize data and AI and to like really accelerate it, I think there's three things that I'm going to talk about today. One is governance at scale. The second is data sharing, secure and seamless data sharing, both within organizations and across organizations, and also being able to enable users, to every user, as much as possible to be able to ask questions of the data. Okay. How many people here are familiar with the Databricks platform? I was going to just give a quick overview. Okay, there's quite a few people, but there's also quite a few people who are not. So I will help level set a little bit on the platform, on like some of the capabilities. But today I'm going to focus on just a few parts of it that really enable, and really the concepts of what we've seen enable data democratization. So at the foundation of the platform, there's data that's stored in an open format. And then we have Unity Catalog, which is like a governance layer. And then there is a platform for secure data sharing. It's called Delta Sharing. And then we have, of course, AI capabilities. There is ingestion and streaming capabilities. And then there's a data warehouse layer called Databricks SQL. And then there's analytics capabilities. So for today, I'm going to focus on Unity Catalog, because really I want to talk about like governance at scale and how that really helps with data democratization. And then I'll talk about data sharing and how you can leverage Delta sharing to be able to do that. And then the analytics layer, AI BI, for intelligent analytics. So let's start with governance at scale. So to be able to protect and understand your data, you need a consistent security and authorization model that works across a large number of asset types, right? It has to work across tables, notebooks, dashboards, and even AI models. It also has to work across like hundreds of users. You need to be able to govern access, right, for hundreds of users, system accounts, and even AI agents. And so traditional catalogs only cover a fraction of this space. And so with Unity Catalog, it's one governance layer across all data and AI assets, and then there's unified capabilities for every use case. So for example, with data democratization, right, you need to be able to have access controls, and it needs to work across different asset types. Similarly, I'm going to talk about capabilities like lineage and how enabling that to work across different asset types and different use cases really helps with driving adoption within the organization. So going back to the challenges, so enterprises, as we saw earlier in the picture, right, they're not living, or companies are not living in a single system, right? There's many engines, right? There's it could be Spark, could be warehouses, it could be your ML stack, and there's also many formats, right? Parquet, CSV, Iceberg, Delta, and even unstructured files. And there's many use cases, right? There's BI, there's compliance. And all of this fragments governance and performance. And so what Unity Catalog does is that it unifies this complexity under a single governance and optimization layer. So it's abstracting away the complexity of storage. And so it's also, we also behind the scenes automatically improve workloads using things like predictive optimization, and also looking at, homogenizing the file formats so that you can focus on the engine that's best for the job and not necessarily worrying about like what format, about compatibility across the formats. So Unity Catalog also provides capabilities like lineage. So why does lineage matter for data democratization, right? Lineage is not just about compliance, right? Analysts want to know if a number can be trusted. Engineers want to know what breaks if they drop a column. I mean, I'm sure everyone here has experienced that intern, or maybe not an intern, who dropped a column that broke a bunch of downstream reports. These all sound like simple questions, but in reality, to actually get this information, you're traversing lineage graphs with millions and trillions of nodes. And you need to be able to do this across different types of workloads as well. So let's walk through. I want to walk you guys through what this looks like in practice. This is a unified lineage graph, right? And so it's a little bit tinier than I was expecting, but you can see. I guess you guys cannot see my cursor. Okay, right here. So this is a table, and then that information is then being streamed, right? And you need to be able to see, in this case, like column level Spark streaming lineage. And then this information is then getting outputted in a file. And so you want to be able to just see how the information is flowing. And it's not just information going from one table to another table to a view to a dashboard. It can get pretty complicated in reality as to what's happening with the data. So also wanting to be able to see like lineage for AI workloads as well really also helps with that visibility. So we capture lineage automatically across tables, across dashboards, notebooks, and even unstructured data. And then we can track lineage down to the table and column level. And of course, because these data estates are so fragmented, you also want to be able to bring in lineage, we call it bring your own lineage from external systems, and then stitch that metadata across, so it's not just within one system what's happening, but across the full data estate where the data is flowing. So lineage is just one capability in Unity Catalog. There's similar capabilities like this, but this is what I've seen, capabilities like lineage really help with driving data democratization within an organization because of all the visibility that it provides, but it has to be able to work across systems and within a system across different assets and use cases. Okay, so far we've talked about a lot about internal democratization, so enabling people within an organization to work with data. But increasingly, data has to move across organizations. Actually, I was having a great conversation here earlier with a couple of people from Washington who work for Washington State, and they need to be able to share data actually with the public. And so, actually, I was going to let me a quick show of hands. How many people here share data, either internally or externally? Okay. Yes, a lot of hands. And how many of you wish that this was still easier to do? Yes, I see a few hands at least going up. So historically, we've solved this by copying data, right? Every copy creates a new mini data estate, it's like new refresh schedule, new governance risk, and can also be inconsistent. Let's talk about data sharing. I'll dive into sharing patterns. There's largely 4 categories that we see. First, there's internal sharing, and so this is all about breaking down silos within an organization, right? So being able to share data easily across different business units, and it could be that the data needs to be shared across different regions. It could be across different clouds. It can even be from on-prem to cloud, and it can also be across different platforms. Then there is peer-to-peer sharing, and this is where you might need to be able to share data with your suppliers or share data with your partners, and even in some cases being able to share data with your customers. So how can you do that? How can you collaborate? And then of course there's third-party data. A lot of organizations will purchase data to augment their existing data to get insights of the data. So for example, in financial services, there's providers like S&P and Bloomberg, and then in healthcare there's like HealthVerity and IQVIA. And so being able to purchase that data or license that data and use that to augment existing data for insights. And then finally, the last kind of sharing pattern is data that's in SaaS applications, right? Data that's in SAP, for example. And so being able to bring that data and get that information that might be locked away in various SaaS tools and use that as well to augment analysis. So, with existing approaches to sharing, right, a lot of it is the provider will host the data in an FTP server, right, or there's dumping the data into a storage bucket, and then the recipient needs to build out an ETL pipeline to ingest that data and integrate it with their platform. And there's significant infrastructure investments on the provider side to enable that to happen. Some organizations use in-warehouse sharing, and for this, the challenge here is that you cannot share with recipients on other platforms. They need to be able to be on the same platform. And if the recipient needs now access to the data, they're like having to go and create accounts to be able to consume the shares from that platform. So the ideal solution would be something that's open, cross-platform, so you can collaborate with people that are on different platforms without requiring any migration. Ideally, it's open source, so you're not locked into any vendor. It also you need to be able to, the right people who have the permission to share the data should be able to share the data, because you don't want data to be shared without the right controls. And in a lot of cases, you actually need to be able to share live data, so not just a copy of the data. And so being able to do that instant sharing without making copies. And of course, it has to be performant. You want to be able to query that data in a performant way, or at least as performant as like non-shared assets. So this is where delta sharing comes in. We've been able to do this with delta sharing. It's an open, very widely used protocol for cross-cloud, cross-platform data sharing. We open sourced it in 2021. With delta sharing, you can share all data assets, like tables, views. You can share data across clouds and regions, and you can share live data directly from the warehouse. And you can also share data cross-platform regardless of where the clients are. So the way that it works is the provider has the data in their lakehouse, and then the consumer, the person consuming the data, can use their existing tools. So they can use pandas. We see a lot of BI tools, like Power BI, being able to then connect to the data directly. And so you don't have to switch platforms to be able to get access to this data. So I wanted to give some examples, on how we see this work. So I think the internal sharing is, pretty straightforward. It should be pretty obvious how that works. But just one example, like Mercedes, they have a complex data mesh that spans across data clouds or across multiple clouds, and so they're using delta sharing so that they can create this self-service data experience for their teams to get them to be able to share data and get data from everywhere within the organization. In the peer-to-peer sharing, there's a really great example from Procore. They're in the construction industry, and they use delta sharing to be able to share data with their customers on their projects, on how the site projects are going. It's called Site Insight Analytics. And so it empowers the construction firms to be able to like get access to this data and like keep track of how the projects are going in this kind of seamless like peer-to-peer way. And then we talked a little bit about, the third-party data licensing, like providers being able to share the data using delta sharing, and similarly for SaaS applications. So I thought it would be interesting to share, we have like 4 years of this being in production on like how is this data being shared. So what we actually see is that 40% of the sharing is internal. A lot of the production sharing is internal. 30% is sharing with one external organization, and then the remainder is sharing with many external organizations. So it's still a lot of sharing is happening either internally or with less than 10 organizations. So there is a real need for sharing data across organizations and platforms, and delta sharing is used by 40,000 organizations. Again, it's an open protocol, not specifically tied to Databricks. In fact, what's really interesting is that 40% of the users who consume the data using delta sharing are actually doing it from BI tools or pandas, and so being able to get access to this data. Okay, so the last challenge, that I was going to talk about is how do you get access? How do you get these insights to all types of users, and how do you make sure that these insights are consistent? Okay, so we'll talk about intelligent analytics at scale. So in legacy BI, right, analytics is a separate platform. So that means there's multiple systems to manage. And for users, they have to make this trade-off between performance and scale, right? Am I going to extract the data so it's fast, or am I going to just deal with the query latency? And then a lot of these platforms, of course, now have AI assistants, but the knowledge there is limited to what's in the dashboard. And there's a lot of information in the platform that might not be surfaced there. Well, let's take a look at what happens in practice, and exec ask the question, what's the average revenue per customer? So then an analyst will write a SQL query, and they'll build out a dashboard. And it takes, the analyst is working with many other people in the organization to be able to do this. In the meantime, there's other users who are waiting in queue to get the analyst to be able to answer their questions. And then within the organization, each team might build a slightly different definition, and so then you can also end up with inconsistent answers. So making data accessible to everyone is challenging because of some of the reasons I just showed, right? Access is limited to specialists, business users are waiting in queues, and different teams use different definitions, resulting in inconsistent answers. So in Databricks, I'm going to talk about some of the components that we have in Databricks to apply to this, but the principles kind of apply in general of being able to make data more available within the organization. So with Genie, you can, it's basically an application within Databricks where users can ask questions in natural language. And then there's Unity Catalog Business Semantics, where you can have governed definitions that are stored at the, at the platform layer and like governed at the platform layer. And then of course, we already talked about Unity Catalog that enables, governance and access for both analysts and business users and capabilities like lineage. So let's talk a little bit about Genie. So what is Genie? With Genie, users can ask questions about data in natural language. At the core of it, Genie is a compound AI system. It has multiple agents that are working together so that you can come up with, the response, the natural language response to the user. So there's an agent that's planning a query, that's an agent that's generating SQL, there's another that's handling the visualization so that it can answer the question. The other thing that sets it apart is that it has context of your business, of your environment. So when a user is asking a question, it understands, because the person who created the Genie space has curated and put in some of this information. It understands the company's context, and it also constantly learns from it. To give you an example, like just within the company, in our marketing department, we have Thomas, he's an analyst, and so he created this Genie space for the marketing team to be able to understand how the marketing campaigns are going. So like Rick, who's our CMO, can go in and ask questions in natural language and not have to worry about writing SQL. And so the way that Thomas set this up is like he puts in context, like he'll put in instructions, he'll put in some example SQL, and he curates the space so that it can give consistent answers and answers with context. They've called the Genie team Marge, Marketing Genie, Marge. I thought that was clever. And so that's really how the space works. And so when Thomas is setting up the context, beyond like manually putting in instructions and like context on like, specific marketing campaigns, what we also have is knowledge mining, so that it's going through the usage patterns, right? Using lineage that we talked about earlier and using query history to be able to suggest like these are the types of questions that people are asking, and being able to put that context into the Genie space. There's also knowledge extraction. So as the space gets used and as new questions might come up or new context comes up, it will ask, hey, Genie will suggest, do you want to add this to the knowledge store? Do you want to add this context to the knowledge store? And then, of course, we believe in human in the loop, so the user has to approve it. But this ensures that, the more it's getting used, the smarter that it gets. And so this is, this is how enabling users to be able to ask questions in natural data. But going back, remember our question from earlier. So what's the average, the executive was asking, what's the average revenue per customer? So user one, will come in and they will write a SQL query and gives an answer. And then user two comes in, and they will ask a different question. They'll put a different query, a slightly different query, and now you have same question, two different answers going to the executive. So two analysts asking the same question should not get different answers. So how do you enforce semantic consistency across so many queries and users? This is where UC business semantics comes in. And this is something that Genie also leverages, but you don't have to just use this in Genie. You can also use this with other SQL clients. So UC business semantics, the way it works is that you're centrally defining the dimensions and the measures, and then in Unity Catalog, you can govern who can edit and use them, right? And so now when the analysts are writing questions or writing the SQL queries, they just reference the dimensions and measures in the SQL query, and voila, users get the same answer. And the reason that this works is because it's now at the platform layer, it's in Unity Catalog, there's certification, so you know which metrics have been certified by the organization so that you can use them, you can discover them, through Unity Catalog. And so that also really helps with driving, adoption of this type of data within the organization. So just to kind of summarize again, so with Unity Catalog, you're business semantics, you're defining the business metrics in one place, right? And you can govern them through Unity Catalog, and you can access from any SQL client. And so, even if you're not using, Databricks specifically, but the idea of being able to have these business semantics that are kind of central to the organization and, certified really, really helps with driving data democratization. So going back to the examples, the customer examples that I shared earlier, I did want to, kind of show the impact that they've had from being able to leverage these capabilities. 80% of the company leveraging tools to get insights from data. This is Italigas. And then for Sega, like being able to get their line of business leaders, getting them access to be able to ask questions of the data in natural language and seeing a 10x faster time to insight from self-service productivity. So at Databricks, we see governance at scale, seamless data sharing, and intelligent analytics really driving data democratization. These are not solved problems, though. There's still so much more to do. And so, I'm excited to engage in discussion with this group on, what you have seen worked, and being able to share some of these best practices. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Have we got any questions? One at the back. Hand over to you.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. This question is specifically about Business Genie. Because LLMs still have very obvious problems with hallucination,
yes.
Is this product ready for prime time, like actually making CMO level decisions? And if so, is it because there's some techniques you guys use that just aren't LLMs, like
yes.
I know like Excel's flash fill, for example, uses something that's a little bit more correct than an LLM, but is a lot more intensive, or are you kind of just throwing it out there and seeing what people do with it?
So it is being used in production. It is being used by organizations in production. And there is a bunch of work that we do to not have these hallucinations. So some of it is what I was talking about is like that curation, like curating the information ahead of time. I didn't walk through the flow chart, but in the flow chart, when a user creates the Genie space, like when I was giving the example of Thomas on our marketing team, when he creates that space, he put in a set of instructions. Like think of it almost as like training an intern. So he's setting that context up, like here's some specific SQL that you should use for these questions. And then there's a feature like benchmarks as well that you can keep testing to make sure that it works. So there's techniques like that we are using to make sure that that's why it's a very curated space to be able to not have these hallucinations. Yeah, and then there's other techniques like being very intentional about like pruning being very intentional about the context that is being sent to the LLM, things like that, so that you can get better answers. Like there's a verification agent to then verify that answer. Yeah, great question. Yeah, we're using it, internally in production. We have examples of customers using it in production as well. Yeah.
Sort of following up on that. How does the agent know to not what happens when the Genie encounters a question that is out of scope or not easily answerable by the information that's curated?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So that is actually it won't answer it. I'll try not to answer it. But there's also example questions that are part of the space, so you can see like what type and context on like what the space can answer. And then internally when our marketing team rolled it out, there was actually like a kind of an education session that he did on even like how do you ask the questions, what types of questions you can ask, and then it's also both like shown within the space itself on like what you can ask, but also education as well. There's a blog from Thomas. Actually, I'm also an author on the blog, so if you search for my name, you can find that blog on some of the best practices to set up a Genie space.
Hi, thank you. It's a great discussion. I appreciate it. We just got wrapped up, I should say wrapped up, wonderfully involved with WATech and what you're doing with them with Databricks. I really appreciate it. And one of the things I thought I heard them say, and I can check this later, just convenient moment, is that you can outwardly post or face an agent such that our clients can then utilize it to ask questions. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is a great question. So we're, and I get a chance to
I have a
mention
follow-up
this.
to that, but
okay.
go ahead.
So what we are actually seeing people do is that they will create multiple Genie spaces, right? And then they will build an agent on top, and then they will route that. Like they're doing, it's not, within Genie at all, but like they're leveraging different Genie spaces. They have an agent on top, and it will route to different Genie spaces.
And how do you deal with the idea of injection in that format? So if we're not, since you're outwardly pointing it, you stand a bigger risk of someone trying to do something nefarious with your prompt.
Yeah. So I've seen customers do it. The way they're doing it is similar to what we're doing within the Genie space. Like they provide like constraints, or like they're actually checking what input is getting put in into that question. Because remember, this is an agent that is not even, like they've developed, like they have a engineering team that has developed this agent. And so within that, they're putting in logic and guardrails on like what to then send. And then when that information gets sent to the Genie space, similar to the question that was asked here earlier, like if that Genie space doesn't have that context, because you're setting up the context by saying there's these tables, and we usually say like a smaller number of tables will give you, better results. So there's these tables that are in this Genie space, there's these example SQLs, there's these benchmarks. And so if that question that comes into that Genie space, that agent routed is not relevant, like you're not going to get, a response back. But we are seeing people do work, across, multiple Genie spaces and doing that work themselves.
Well, a lot of that's on us to set up the prompt, the internal prompt.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. I think maybe I can take, time. There is time for, I got the 5-minute warning, so I think we have time for maybe a couple more questions.
Sorry to make you run. Generally, love the lineage tool here. It's very helpful to be able to see visually like how those are traced back and answer a lot of questions. However, I still have a lot of problems where when we introduce issues or we have issues escalated to us about anomalies in our data sets, that we still have to go through that exercise of tracing back to identify like where anomalies are being introduced within our data pipelines, especially when they get super complex. I'm kind of curious about where you see the future of data lineage tools and potential like anomaly detection in complex multi-node processes.
Yeah, this is like very top of mind for me right now, actually, actively working on this. So I'd also love to maybe catch up after and get your thoughts on the challenges. So the way that we're also thinking about this is, one is constantly, the first thing that we see is actually there's a lot of like missing information in lineage, right? So they're still like continuing to expand like what all is covered by lineage. But then to your point, in terms of anomaly detection, we're starting to work on things like data classification, which is like leveraging lineage to then say, hey, this data might be PII, right? Like to auto-suggest some of that information based on that information. And then, if this data is PII and this downstream information is, derived from it, like, surfacing that information. The other thing we're looking at is like data quality monitoring, and this is where the anomaly detection comes in, to be able to try and surface some of those insights. But I'd love to learn, more of the specifics that you guys are running into, because this is very much top of mind for us. Yeah, and that was also what I was trying to convey is like there's lineage, like great, but the hard part becomes, in a production system when data is going to, S3, and, it's coming from a Spark streaming workload, and it's unstructured data. And so when you don't have that information, it then just becomes a lot harder. And so the more complete lineage that you can build, the easier it is to then diagnose some of these issues later. Yeah.
Can one genie take a okay? Can one genie cache the cache answers that it's not supposed to for when interacting with another genie? And how do you deal with such a situation? It's kind of like someone taking a photo of the answer key and sharing it with her. Yeah.
I got the first question. I didn't quite understand the second question.
Oh, the second question was that's kind of like a parallel situation, like
Okay.
like someone sharing an answer key when they're not supposed to.
Yeah, so for each Genie space is unique and kind of curated on its own. Like there's one owner, and of course they can add multiple owners, but each Genie space is different. You could end up with person A created a Genie space that has tables. Person B creates another Genie space that has the same set of tables, but they've curated it differently, right? There's different instructions. And that they will not share information. Like they don't, it's all within the space. So then what comes up is like, well, how do you know which Genie space to use then? And so this is where, the governance in Unity Catalog comes in, because then you can certify. You can say, like, for example, for the marketing Genie for Marge, this is like the certified Genie space that was built by Thomas, and the whole marketing team needs to use that one, and so that one is certified. Yeah, good question. Yeah, okay, we're at time. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for the questions, and we'll love to connect with people after and talk more. Thank you.